Well, thank you very much to everyone still here to listen to this panel. And you saw me nodding my head quite a bit regarding Line 3 and Enbridge's efforts recently coming off an engagement with one of our communities in the Treaty 4 area. I can say for certain that Enbridge has come a long way in terms of improving its ability to engage First Nations communities. My new role as the First Nations Power Authority CEO, back in 2011, we had launched what was, I think, a very ambitious project with the province of Saskatchewan and First Nations in that province to look at how to procure energy opportunities in terms of transmission or in terms of power generation. We do have set-asides with our master's agreement, a 10-year agreement with SAS Power, and I think there's lots of good things yet to be learned from the set-aside process. We work specifically in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and so the energy decision-making process, I think, is different from what exists in an unregulated market versus not unregulated, but an open market versus a Crown corporation operating as a sole entity. I think my first objective in taking office, if you will, I'm a former politician. Chief Baird referred to herself as a recovering politician. I'm one of those as well. Served at FSIN for about 12 years. And I think there's one question you ask about how to balance national interests versus the socioeconomic concerns of First Nations and Métis communities is how do we thread this needle of the national concerns around energy projects in Canada. And I think the one word that I would use in that challenge, I think, is the word spirituality. The land and the environment and the waters and the air and everything we do with energy, and energy itself, there's a spiritualness in that, in all being. And I think if we relate that to First Nations cultures and traditions and our history with this land, it's certainly based on a foundation of spirituality. And I truly believe that when we start out having elders in proceedings such as this and community meetings with energy professionals and having talking circles, it's an important aspect of who we are. And it gains a better understanding because everyone's sort of sitting around in a circle on equal footing. No matter if we're CEOs of major companies or regulators or so forth, or government officials, we have to come down to the very basic viewpoints and respect the viewpoints of First Nations in those communities, the elders and youth and women and everyone else. It's a very convoluted process in terms of chiefs having to consult with various levels of government, provincial, federal, regulators, industry, and so forth. And so I think some of the challenges that the National Expert Panel addressed in terms of the National Energy Board and looking at changes and alternatives is trying to build local capacity with First Nations. How do we ensure that there's adequate information being shared at the community level? And I think that's a remaining challenge, and it'll be something that we have to get to and aspire to. Will we see a day when there's actual consent of First Nations on major projects in the country? We have to have those discussions. And as uncomfortable as it may seem to be a conversation in the national sphere, we certainly do have to have that. So the earlier panel addressed some of those concerns, and I 100% agreed with the approaches that they were addressing. So what does the future look like? I think we have to have a good second look at a lot of the recommendations that came out of that national panel and really truly explore what those recommendations were. Is there an opportunity for a national energy council, Aboriginal or Indigenous Advisory Council? I think that's something that we should really consider. When it's done with and by Aboriginal people and their institutions, we seem to get a lot of more traction that way. In Saskatchewan, for example, chiefs and councils have delegated authority to their development corporation, who are staffed with CEOs, staffed with knowledgeable people from industry. Some of them are sit on Crown Corporation boards and do join the decision-making table at the community. And so we've got a tremendous wealth of opportunity around development corporations in the country. The Athabasca Basin Development Corporation, for example, is a very, very sophisticated, high-level investment development company, and has emerged from 4 Métis communities and 3 First Nations in northern Saskatchewan. They're a huge business. They started out, I think, with a desire and a need to improve the socioeconomic circumstances in northern communities in the Athabasca region. And some of their decision-making as of late has been to do or not to build a hydro dam on their lands to look at supplying power to mines in northern Saskatchewan. Now, we know that there's been a dip in activity in the mining sector and investment, but there's still the socioeconomic concerns of those communities that need to be addressed. And so as the power authority, we've gone back to SaskPower and said, okay, we need to look at alternatives because the status quo just isn't good enough. There's energy poverty, there's straight poverty in terms of having employment opportunities, having jobs, and contributing to the overall regional economy and the national economy. So we have to be not just a transactional relationship with SaskPower, but a transformational. That relationship has to be transformational. So it has to be where we look at innovative projects. Maybe there's virtual net metering in southern parts of Saskatchewan to meet the energy needs of those people in the north. And why is that? Because it's far better to see our children, see their parents get up and go to work and be productive members of society rather than the status quo of staying on social assistance and having somebody else pay your power bill. Those are some of the very real discussion topics we had with the SaskPower CEO and their vice presidents just last week. And so on the ground, FNPA is there to provide, I think, that interface between communities that are really struggling, I think, with sustainability issues, and we are certainly open to having more conversations and discussions about coming up with options and power project opportunities for many communities throughout Canada. We are primarily Alberta and Saskatchewan, but we look at a variety of opportunities in Western Canada. So, thank you.